I am Josh Blackman. I'm a constitutional law professor at the South Texas College of Law, Houston. And I have some expertise in the very fast-moving area of presidential impeachment and the 25th Amendment. There are two standards that are relevant. One is the 25th Amendment, and the second is impeachment. The 25th Amendment gives the vice president and the cabinet the power to remove the president temporarily if they think he's not able to discharge the duties of his office. That's never been done before. The second issue is impeachment. We had an impeachment just last year. And the question is whether the president committed a high crime and misdemeanor. And I think the argument here is, was his speech inciting violence, or was it protected by the First Amendment? People have speech rights, including the president. I think that's actually a difficult question, the answer. It's a crime to incite imminent violence. If I said, let's go march in the Capitol and break the windows and smash things, that would probably cross the line. Trump is careful. He knows what not to say. He said, let's go down Pennsylvania Avenue and show them what we think.
And be strong.
And be strong. And show them our support. And he's so deliberate with his words. You might think he doesn't know what he's doing, but he's crazy like a fox. Keep in mind, we're now 13 days away from the inauguration, so anything that happens will be short-lived. But there might be some determination that immediate, urgent action is needed in light of the events that transpired on January 6th. The 25th Amendment is very vague. It simply says if the president is unable to discharge the duties of his office, and we don't really know what that means. If 8 of the 15 cabinet members, there are 15, so the majority, 8 of 15 agree, then that's all that needs to happen. At that point, the president's removed from office for at least 4 days. At least 4 days. Afterwards, Congress would have to take a vote. And to actually remove the president, you need 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate. So you need to have a lot of people buying in, but at least for the next 4 days, the president will be out of office.
Which would be a third of his remaining time in office.
Correct. And keep in mind one more important thing. The Congress has up to 21 days to vote. 21 days to vote. So they could simply just run out the clock and just sit on it for 3 weeks, and then Biden comes into office.
And in that interim, would the president get his powers back, or he would still be out of office?
If the majority of the cabinet says he's still not able to do his job, he would not regain the power for at least 21 days.
So all it takes is 8 members of the cabinet today, and his term would be over.
If the vice president and 8 out of 15 agree, the president's term will be effectively over.
When has that been done before in American history?
Never been done before. We've had 25th Amendment issues, but for harmless things. For example, President George W. Bush had a colonoscopy, and he had to go under anesthesia. And he voluntarily gave the office to Dick Cheney for, a couple hours, right? That was normal, right? We've had presidents die in office. John Kennedy was assassinated, and Lyndon Johnson stepped up, right? We've had other issues, but never had the cabinet move to take the president out. There were some rumors that some of Trump's people wanted to remove him back in 2017 when he fired the FBI director, James Comey. Nothing came of it. There were discussions of the 25th Amendment. It's a very radical provision, but it's authorized by the Constitution.
And is there any parameter on it that the Founding Fathers established, as in some sort of mental health issue? I mean, is there any guidance that the cabinet has as to when this should be used and when not?
The 25th Amendment was ratified in the 20th century, so this is not about what James Madison thought in the 1780s. This is a fairly modern provision. And the history of this provision doesn't give us a lot of insight over what it means. For certain, that in my mental capacity, the president has a stroke. He's in a coma, right? He can't think. But exercising poor judgment, right? Is that sufficing? Inciting crowds to violence, would that be enough? This is going to be something that each member of the cabinet is to judge for himself. It's not something the courts can review.
It's not subject to court review at all?
No.
A president cannot go to the Supreme Court and say this is unjust?
He can try. I don't think the court will take it.
This president or any president?
I think any president would try. I don't think any court would take it. This is a matter for Congress and the executive branch to decide.
It is rightly a very hard thing to do.
It should be. And keep in mind, this is 8 out of 15 people that Trump himself appointed. These are not, Democrat resistance members. These are loyalists for the most part. These are people who've been there since day one. Ben Carson, Betsy DeVos, Steve Mnuchin, Wilbur Ross, right? These are people who've been with him for years, and now they have to vote to remove him.
And as we sit midday on Thursday, how many of them are you aware of that have said, no, this is a good idea, we should do this?
Well, I think the first rule of presidential removal is you don't talk about presidential removal, right? They're not going to say until they do it, because it's one of these things where you want to depose a president, you have to keep it quiet till you actually do it. If Trump gets wind this is happening, he could simply fire everyone in his cabinet and replace them with loyalists. So, in theory, the president could forestall a 25th Amendment removal. We're like in spy novel territory, right? This is very uncharted waters.
Well, and practically speaking, now as we put back the reality of this timeline, do you sense that there's really any real way to do this quickly?
The 25th Amendment could be exercised overnight. It would take a meeting of the cabinet. It would take a couple of hours. It could be done.
The second half of this, or the other side of this coin, is impeachment. And that's something that Congress obviously could do on its own yesterday, today, tomorrow. How does that work in this instance?
Well, impeachment can be done fast or it can be done slow, right? The impeachment of President Trump took months. The impeachment of President Andrew Johnson in 1868 took weeks, right? Tomorrow, the House could vote to impeach him. It would take very long. You don't need a hearing. The president would get a trial in the Senate, and I don't know that you could do a trial in 12 days. I mean, you could. It wouldn't be very fair. You may not like President Trump very much, but I think there are certain due process rights that you have some opportunity to present a defense in your trial. Even then, I don't know that there are 2/3 votes to remove him. I think you may get closer, but not quite 2/3. So I think impeachment is probably off the table. The best way of getting him out would be the 25th Amendment, if that's what a majority of the cabinet thinks is warranted. There is an argument that some professors suggest that you can actually impeach someone out of office for the purpose of preventing them from going for federal office again. That's never been tested. So in theory, they can impeach Trump after January 20th and prevent him from ever holding office ever again. Never, ever, ever. But until yesterday, that the American Capitol was never stormed by Americans. That hadn't happened until yesterday. Here we are today.
As you study the Constitution, do you think it was written for moments like this?
I think we have a written Constitution. It's a short book. You can put it in your hand, hold it in your hand. The words mean nothing unless the people are united by some common sense of a republic. We have what we call parchment barriers. It's just paper. It doesn't stop anything. And if the people no longer have faith in the system, then we can just chuck the Constitution in the garbage. It doesn't mean a damn thing, right? You need to have some sort of common shared understanding of a republic and what that means. And once that civic virtue dissolves, we're left with anarchy, the symptom of a far greater disease. There's been discontent stewing for years, and it blew up on January 6th, not just in D.C., but in Austin and state houses across the country. If people firmly believe that you can only lose an election because of fraud, then we can't have a country. If you have zero faith in the electoral system, then we can't have elections, right? If President Trump's election was a cheat, that means all the members of Congress were in a cheat election, all the senators were cheated, that the entire representative government has to go.